Life has a way of throwing unexpected curveballs when you least expect them. The chain of events that led me to this realization began on what I thought would be an ordinary day. My friends and I had spent years sharing moments that strengthened our bond. Fishing trips, late-night talks by the fire, and shared laughter were the threads woven into the fabric of our friendships. But I had no idea a storm was forming beneath the surface, ready to upend the world I had carefully built. Laura and I were high school sweethearts, drawn together by shared dreams and the invincibility that only youth brings. After graduation, I threw myself into building our future, tirelessly working to launch a pool service business. What started small, with just a few clients, grew into a thriving enterprise serving hundreds of homes, all driven by my commitment to give Laura the life I had promised her. We had a beautiful home, wonderful children, and friends who felt like family. Everything seemed perfect. But life's harshest twists often hide behind a facade of contentment. It began as we prepared for our annual guys' weekend at the lake, a cherished 3-day escape where Scott, Stan, Roger, and I could unwind and trade daily responsibilities for the peaceful embrace of nature. This trip was especially meaningful. It was my chance to step back from the relentless pace of my expanding company and take a breath. The women, including Laura, had their own plans for the weekend, happily unbothered by our absence. I couldn't have foreseen that a simple decision to return home for forgotten bait would lead to a revelation that would upend my life. When Laura and I married, we were fresh out of high school, but I was ambitious and driven. Soon after graduation, I started a small pool service business, which grew in just 2 years to serve over 100 homes with 4 employees. The business kept expanding, and 2 decades later, I was managing a company serving over 1,500 homes with a team of 30 committed employees, including Stan, who had become invaluable. Despite no college degree or professional background, Stan's enthusiasm, work ethic, and team rapport made him an outstanding leader for our Orlando branch. I rewarded his contributions by promoting him, raising his salary significantly, and offering future ownership in the company. Our professional relationship blossomed into a genuine friendship, and I enjoyed working alongside him. Over time, I expanded the company's reach from Tampa to Orlando, making it the leading pool service provider in Central Florida. With most homes requiring constant pool maintenance, our services were in high demand. Revenue and profits soared, solidifying our market position. As the business grew, I understood the importance of sound financial management. I leaned on Howard, a trusted relative with extensive experience as a retired tax accountant. Following his advice, I used all my home equity to expand during a period of low mortgage rates. My trust in Howard was well placed, as he and his attorney wife provided critical guidance that contributed to our success. Beth, a corporate lawyer, advised putting the company in a trust to protect it from liabilities and future lawsuits, a suggestion I followed, making her my go-to confidant. Ah, the joys of married life and the pursuit of a dream home. Laura and her friends adored our upscale new house. A chic neighborhood, a huge pool, a spacious patio with a Hawaiian-style bar, and a grilling area that any barbecue enthusiast would envy. Laura had her preferences, and I found it hard to resist her persuasive charm. In this prestigious neighborhood where property values were skyrocketing, I catered to her every wish, convinced that we'd eventually benefit from it. Love can make you do things you'd never consider otherwise. But it's all worth it, right? Well, that moment finally arrived. Laura and her friends arrived at our luxurious home for a weekend of complete relaxation. I was given strict orders not to interfere with their fun. Their goal was to unwind without their husbands around. I happily obliged, eager to avoid their girl talk and weekend gossip. With my fishing gear ready and a heart full of excitement, I set off like a puppy let loose. The fishing trip was a much-needed escape. After weeks of working hard to manage my growing company, the thought of catching fish and sipping a cold drink with friends felt like paradise. Leaving Laura and her crew to their wine and secrets, I couldn't help but feel grateful for having her and her lively group in my life. Sure, they drove us husbands a bit crazy sometimes, but they were the spice that added flavor to our days. A smile spread across my face as I drove to Roger's house, knowing our weekend adventure was just getting started. We had meticulously planned the lake trip, aiming to leave at 6 p.m. and arrive by 9. The 3-day retreat promised fun, fishing, and great conversation. As I prepared to get into the car, I suddenly remembered that I had forgotten my special bait, which I'd been crafting in the workshop. For me, fishing was more than a pastime. It was a passion. I took pride in making my own lures, believing that the right gear could make all the difference. The lure I had worked on that week held special significance. It was a labor of love, custom designed to attract the biggest catch and bring me joy on the water. Understanding how crucial it was to have my bait, I couldn't imagine going on the trip without it. So I told my fishing buddies that I needed to grab it before we set off. They laughed in good humor, knowing my dedication to fishing. At 5 p.m., I got in the car, drove the 7-minute trip home, parked behind the women's cars, and walked to the side door. I quietly went down to the workshop, careful not to disturb the women or risk being scolded for coming home early. Trying to stay as silent as possible, I approached the workbench and realized I could hear their conversation. I chuckled to myself, realizing they were already tipsy, laughing and enjoying themselves. They were sitting in the shade near the Hawaiian hut on the side of the house. The workbench, situated just under the window, was close enough to hear them. I'm not typically one to eavesdrop, nor did I care much for their chatter. But when I heard my wife talking about me in bed, I perked up. I'm not sure why, but I decided to record this part of the conversation to tease her later. I activated the voice recorder app on my iPhone. The next few minutes wrecked my plans and turned my world upside down. I had stumbled into an unexpected conversation. The women weren't holding back, and their openness made me smile at first. They were discussing very private topics, and things were getting intense. Laura, with a mischievous laugh, began to share details about our relationship. I heard her tell her friends how skilled I was, and that I had never let her down. After all these years, I thought, well, there's Laura, bragging about her husband. She continued, admitting that while the passion had lessened over the years, it was normal for any long marriage. Then, out of the blue, one of the women posed the question that sent chills down my spine. So, is that why you did it with Stan? I leaned in, trying to gauge Laura's response. The women were on a mission, piecing together Laura's recent actions. Given her openness, I sensed that things were about to get interesting. Waiting for her answer, I felt tension building. My heart stopped when I heard it. Did Laura just admit to something with Stan, our Stan? Panic and disbelief washed over me like a wave, and I moved closer, desperate to catch every word. My mind raced as I struggled to comprehend what I'd just heard. Stan, a friend I trusted, had been involved with my wife. It felt like the ground beneath me was collapsing, and I fought to stay composed. Each word cut like a knife. The laughter and giggles that once brought joy now felt like a cruel mockery. My hands trembled as I clutched my phone. My heart raced, and tears threatened to spill. As I continued listening, feeling helpless, the shock and pain grew unbearable, and I wished I could rewind time to erase what I'd just heard. In that moment, the truth hit me like a ton of bricks. The trust I had in Laura and Stan shattered. I felt lost, betrayed, utterly broken. The pain was overwhelming, leaving me devastated. I knew that my life had changed forever. The peace and happiness in our home would be replaced by heartache. No, Bob and I have a good bed life. In that area, he's always been enough for me. I love him and would never start anything with Stan on purpose. It just happened, Laura said. Come on, Laura, you cheated on Bob. You can't be that happy in your marriage, another voice pressed. No, you don't get it. Bob is everything to me. He's not just my husband. He's my home, my peace, my heart, and my safe place. Yes, he satisfies me, and I love him deeply. What happened with Stan was just a terrible mistake. But you said Stan was great in bed, so we're assuming you slept with him. We don't understand. Tell us the whole story, one of her friends urged. Girls, what I'm telling you stays here, Laura said firmly. If the guys find out, they'll liquidate Stan, and my husband will throw me out. I'd never intentionally hurt him. He's so sweet, but he wouldn't understand. Promise me this stays between us. I assumed they nodded as there was no audible response. Laura sighed. Okay, don't repeat this, but after Susan left Stan last month, he was a wreck, completely blindsided. He was planning to propose to her. When I ran into him at the restaurant, we sat and talked. He poured his heart out, crying. Seeing this big, strong man so broken pulled at my heart. I stayed with him until he calmed down. He was so lost and upset that I felt an instinctive need to comfort him. Yeah, you're old enough to be his mother, one friend joked. Spare us, Laura. You needed him for more than comfort. Laura paused briefly before continuing. Well, you're right, but Zex wasn't on my mind at the time. He walked me to my car, thanked me for being there and listening. I smiled and gave him a friendly kiss. That's when the spark ignited. Before I could pull away, he drew me in and kissed me in a way I hadn't experienced in years. It was the kind of kiss that made my knees weak. Her words made my chest tighten with pain, and I began to tremble. unsure if it was from anger or fear of what would come next. After the kiss ended, Laura said, he silently took my hand and led me to his truck, which was parked a few rows down under a tree. I don't know why I let it happen. I was in a daze. We got into the back of his truck and kissed like teenagers. Then he admitted he'd always found me attractive and had fantasies about being with me. I was shocked and flattered, and what I did next is hard to explain. At that moment, I didn't think about Bob or our family. I just acted on impulse, unbuckling his belt and pulling down his pants. I don't know why, but I suddenly wanted it. He was grateful and said he needed it after everything he'd been through. Listening to this, I felt as though my heart was being torn in two. The pain her words caused was indescribable. I felt every cell in my body shaking as loss overwhelmed me. Roger's wife, Mary, then chimed in, "Wow, that's intense. We didn't know you had that side to you." "Neither did I," Laura admitted. "I never imagined doing something like this, but it just happened." Scott's wife, Emily, added, "I think we all have those fantasies, but they never actually happen. Good for you. What happened next?" Laura's voice grew softer, filled with regret. "When I realized what I'd done, guilt washed over me. I knew it was wrong and that Bob would never forgive me. I made it clear to Stan that it couldn't happen again and that Bob would feel utterly betrayed if he knew. Stan agreed," she continued. "He said it was just a moment of passion and promised it would stay between us." Standing there, my heart shattered as Laura's confession echoed in my head. Mary's reaction delivered the final blow to any hope I had left, erasing every last bit of trust and leaving me feeling empty and lost. "So how did it escalate to sleeping with Stan and making Bob betrayed?" Mary pressed. That question felt like the final strike, leaving me broken and humiliated, with a violent urge to confront both Stan and my wife. Laura hesitated before describing how Stan had approached her, seeking comfort during a low point. "That fleeting pleasure was eclipsed by the guilt and pain I caused," she said, her voice heavy. "I made a huge mistake and should have known better. Stan invited me to lunch, but I turned him down, saying we shouldn't see each other alone," Laura admitted. "He said he was feeling depressed and needed someone who understood him. He offered to make dinner if I'd come by for an hour." Going to his house was my next big mistake. We shared a meal, talked, and drank wine. After a while, he told me how much our last meeting meant to him. As he stood near me, taking our plates to the sink, he kissed me again. This time, it was one of those romantic, movie-like kisses. To sum it up, we ended up in bed all day. It wasn't romantic, it was rough and intense. I knew it was wrong, but went along with it anyway. Honestly, it was the best sex I'd had in years. He hadn't been with anyone for a while and was very passionate. It was an unforgettable few hours, but we both knew it was a one-time thing. After showering and getting dressed, I told him it could never happen again, and that he shouldn't contact me. I told him he was a great guy and should find someone his age, and that I wouldn't risk my marriage. We agreed, and that was the last time. "So it only happened twice?" Emily asked. Rage surged through me as I clenched my fists, trying to contain the storm of emotions inside. Laura's admission about her encounters with Stan hit me like a knife to the heart. The pain grew with every word. My world was crumbling, and the life I once knew was gone. Anger burned within me, but there was also a deep, desperate wish to hold on to what was left of our relationship. I didn't want to lose her, yet I didn't know if I could carry the burden of this betrayal. Laura's voice shook as she confessed. "Even though I felt guilty, I couldn't help but hold on to the intense passion I shared with Stan. Those memories became a secret escape that I turned to when Bob and I were together." "No, it won't happen again," Laura said, her voice cracking. "All I have now are those memories. I hate to admit it, but I think about them when Bob and I make love. I know it's wrong, but I can't get them out of my mind. Those memories are all that remain." The room fell silent as her words sank in. There was a deep sadness in Laura's voice as she accepted that the memories of Stan would always be a part of her, no matter how hard she tried to forget. Emily didn't say anything at first, but after a pause, she spoke. "Laura, I'm jealous. I love Scott, but I'd love to experience what you had with Stan. I don't want to complain, but Scott is not exactly well endowed. I do love him, but I would give anything to try something different just once." I heard Mary let out a small sigh as if the story had aroused her. "Oh my God. And poor Bob doesn't know a thing. He has no idea about Stan or that you think about him during Zex. This is so messed up, Laura. You need to get your head straight and forget Stan. Bob isn't stupid, and if you're not careful, he'll find out and be hurt." "Don't worry about Bob," Laura said. "I'll take care of him. He will never know. I'll never do this again, I promise. It was a mistake, and the guilt is hard to live with. Honestly, it's been difficult, even with the wine, but it helps that I finally told someone everything. My future felt uncertain. While the women laughed and shared stories, I was the fool who paid for the big house, the bills, and Laura's luxurious lifestyle. Spas, the country club, shopping trips, a new home with a pool and a housekeeper. All at my expense. The clueless husband. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The shock of Laura's confession hit me hard, and tears ran down my face, showing the depth of my pain. Time felt like a blur as I listened, unable to pull myself away from the harsh reality. I knew I had to leave, to get some distance. With a heavy heart, I grabbed my fishing bait and the bottle of Amontillado sherry I had bought for the guys and headed back to Roger's house. The guys were waiting for me. Despite the storm raging inside me, tears kept streaming down my face as I drove, my mind spinning with confusion and betrayal. I needed time to think, to process the betrayal I had just uncovered. I wasn't ready to confront Laura about what I had learned. The pain was too intense, too raw. I stuck to my plan, escape for the weekend and find some peace to gather my thoughts. But fate had other plans. The thought of spending the weekend with Stan, the person involved, made the pain worse. I didn't know how I would handle it. Would I be able to control my emotions? Could I face him without losing my temper or revealing what I knew? As I drove back to Roger's house, tears continued to fall, and a deep sense of loss consumed me. The weekend ahead loomed like a dark cloud, and I didn't know how to face it. I just knew I needed time to heal and figure out how to cope with my shattered heart. At that moment, I felt completely alone, betrayed by the person I loved and trusted most. When I arrived, Roger was outside, loading his Escalade. He paused and looked up as I approached, immediately noticing that something was wrong. My eyes were red and glazed, but I wasn't prepared to explain. Still, when he spoke, I had to respond with an excuse. "Bob, what's up? You look terrible." "What happened?" Roger asked, concern evident in his voice. "Sorry, Roger," I said, attempting a reassuring tone. "I've got a migraine and just need to rest for a bit." "You sure? You don't look good," he replied, doubt lingering in his eyes. "Yes, I can handle it," I insisted. "Just let me sit in the front, close my eyes, and I'll be fine. I'm not missing this trip. I really need the break." Roger nodded, his expression softening. "Okay, no problem. Why don't you go inside and relax while we finish getting ready? We'll be heading out in about 30 minutes. I'll come get you when it's time." Sure enough, 30 minutes later, I was in the front seat, with Roger taking care of me. He handed me his wife's blindfold and a pair of noise-canceling headphones. Sitting there with Stan and Scott in the back, the blindfold and headphones plunged me into darkness. My senses were limited to touch, smell, and taste, letting me process the situation in silence. The guys respected my quietness and offered to help if needed. I avoided looking at Stan, kept my eyes closed, and thanked them for understanding. For the next 3 hours, sitting in the darkness, I silently reflected on the disaster I had just uncovered. I thought back to the years we spent together, how much I idolized Laura, and how lucky I felt when she gave me Michael and Katie, our amazing children. She claimed it only happened once, that she felt guilty and would never do it again. I wanted to find a way to forgive her and move past it. But the most painful part was her admission that she thinks about Stan when we're physical engaged. As a man, I couldn't imagine anyone surviving that kind of betrayal. No. Sadly, I knew this confession would end our marriage. I thought about how the happy family life we had built might unravel. Tears welled up, and I brushed them away before they became visible. For the first time I could remember, I felt lost and confused. I had no answers, no idea what to do next. At some point, I must have dozed off because the next thing I knew, Roger was shaking my shoulder to wake me up. "Hey, are you okay? How's your head?" he asked as we arrived at the fishing hut. For the next 2 days, I was unusually quiet, using my migraine as an excuse. The guys left me alone, giving me space. As I tried not to ruin the trip for Scott and Roger, I continued to battle with my emotions, reflecting on my life, both past and what lay ahead. It was hard, but I knew I would get through it. 2 days later, with doubts still clouding my mind, I found myself walking down the path to the lake, alone with Stan. Roger and Scott were going to meet us at the boat dock. I followed Stan through the woods, Laura's words replaying in my mind. Anger suddenly surged within me. I noticed a large fallen branch on the side of the path, about the size of a baseball bat. Without thinking, I picked it up, felt its weight, and looked at Stan standing about 20 feet ahead. I rushed forward, lifted the branch, and brought it down on his right shoulder. Though I initially aimed for his head, I shifted at the last moment and struck his collarbone, causing him to collapse in pain. Standing over Stan, I glared at the man who had betrayed me. He clutched his shoulder, eyes wide with pain, as I shouted, "This is for sleeping with my wife." Without hesitation, I kicked him hard between the legs. He collapsed, writhing in agony before slipping into unconsciousness. Minutes later, my rage subsided, and I dragged Stan to a nearby tree, propping him up as he began to regain consciousness. His eyes fluttered open, and he groaned. "What the hell?" "Listen, you piece of crap," I snapped. "I know everything about you and Laura. You're lucky to be alive." Stan's face contorted with remorse as he tried to meet my gaze. "Man, I'm sorry. I didn't mean for this to happen." My jaw tightened, and I felt the heat rise in my cheeks. "Shut up. You slept with her. That's it. Don't talk to me for the rest of the trip, and don't mention any of this to Laura. If you do, you'll regret it for the rest of your life. I don't know what I'll do about her yet, but I don't need you interfering. You've already destroyed my marriage. Don't ruin my revenge." "Bob, she loves you," Stan said, his voice cracking. "Don't leave her over this. It's my fault, not hers. Please blame me. I was in a bad place after Susan left, and Laura was there for me. It just happened, and she felt terrible about it. Please don't divorce her. She truly loves you." I punch him again. I said, "Shut up." Just then, Roger and Scott saw me kicking Stan and rushed over to pull me back. "Bob, what the hell are you doing?" Roger shouted as he rushed over to help Stan to his feet. We made our way back to the cabin, where Stan sat nursing his injured shoulder, anger simmering as he called the attack unfair. I locked eyes with him, cutting off his protests with a sharp warning to stay quiet. Without a word, I pressed play on the recording for everyone to hear. When the recording ended, Roger's gaze turned cold as he glared at his nephew. "You're a disgrace," Roger said, his voice laced with disgust. "Bob trusted you, gave you a job when you had nothing, and this is how you repay him? And now, you're mad that he hit you? You should be thankful we don't dump you in the lake. You're done here. We don't want to hear another word from you." Roger's words hung in the air. Scott chimed in. "There's another problem, though. You heard what Emily and Mary said on the recording. They knew about Laura's betrayal, and were intrigued by it. I have a big issue with that, and when we get home, Emily and I are going to have a serious conversation." "Agreed," Roger said, shooting Stan a deadly look. "See what you've caused? One ruined marriage and maybe more. Maybe we should leave you stranded in the lake." Stan looked down, finally understanding the gravity of what he had done. I spoke up. "Guys, I get that everyone's involved, but please, give me a few days before you do anything. I'll share the recording, but I need to talk to Laura before she finds out I know. Thanks to him, I don't think I can stay with her. Knowing that she thinks about him when we're together, there's no way I can live with that. I'll probably end up divorcing her. I just need some time to figure this out." Roger glared at his nephew, Stan. "You're a disgrace. You won't speak to Laura or any of the other wives without our permission. If you warn Laura about what's coming, we'll make your life miserable. If you disappear, none of us will care. The only reason I didn't touch you and leave you in the woods is because you're my nephew and family. You betrayed a good friend, a decent man. Just because you couldn't hold on to your girlfriend, you went after another man's wife. I'm ashamed to call you my sister's son. Not a word, got it?" Stan nodded in silence. No one spoke to him for the rest of the trip, and to his credit, he kept his distance and avoided any confrontation. Now, all that remained was figuring out what to do about Laura. On the drive home, I kept replaying everything in my mind and wondered how Laura would react if the roles were reversed. And then it clicked. I had a plan. Deep down, I loved Laura and might have been able to forgive the one-time affair with Stan. But the thought of her fantasizing about him while being with me was unbearable. I decided to let Laura determine her own fate. The plan was to bring up the affair as if I were the one who cheated and see how she responded. If she could forgive a one-time lapse, then I could try to do the same for her, and we might find a way forward. However she reacted would reflect how I felt about her and our future. The resolution of her infidelity would rest in her hands. As I pulled into the driveway, my stomach churned and anger bubbled under the surface. I felt grim, but it was time to face Laura, and I needed to stay composed and act normal. One of the hardest things I'd ever done. When I stepped inside, Laura greeted me warmly. She looked beautiful and had dressed up for the occasion. She hugged me tightly and kissed me, gestures I knew I'd miss if she chose the wrong path. Despite my anger, I still loved her, this woman who had betrayed me. My blood boiled thinking about what she'd done. but her perfume and the meal she'd prepared helped me keep my calm. Dinner was pleasant, and I managed to stay gracious, listening to her talk about the last few days. Later, she led me to the bedroom, telling me she missed me and needed to reconnect. She was clearly eager for closeness. I smiled inwardly, knowing everything depended on her reaction. Laura moved fast, pulling my pants down as soon as we were on the bed. In moments, she was on the bed, pulling me toward her. But for the first time ever, I couldn't follow through. She looked at me, stunned. "What's wrong, baby?" she asked. "Showtime." I placed my phone on the nightstand, hitting record to avoid any misunderstanding during our conversation. "Laura, I have to tell you something. There's someone else, and I feel so guilty I can't keep it in any longer." Her eyes widened in shock. "What do you mean, someone else?" she asked. "I'm sorry. It only happened a few times, but the sex was so incredible that I can't stop thinking about it." I watched her expression turn, just as I expected. "You fool! You had sex with someone else and can't stop thinking about it?" "It was just sex, Laura. I still love you," I said, echoing her words without claiming an actual affair. "I can't believe this. What do you mean you can't stop thinking about it?" she demanded. "To be honest, it was the best sex of my life and I can't get it out of my mind," I said, carefully repeating what she'd said from the recording. Her face crumpled, and tears welled up as she processed the betrayal. Was it harsh? Maybe. But I was the real sufferer here, not her. I let her react. Suddenly she snapped, "Screw you! Pack your things and leave. I won't stay married to a cheater, you know that. My father cheated on my mother and left her broken. I'm not going through that. Get out. I'll divorce you and make you pay for this. I was the perfect wife. I gave you 2 great kids, kept the house, cooked your meals, and loved you. And this is how you repay me?" I almost laughed at Laura's reaction and sharp comments. She wouldn't be feeling so confident in just a few minutes. That much was certain. "Laura, it was just sex. It only happened twice. Come on, it was just one time. Are you really sure you want a divorce over this?" I said, trying to sound remorseful. "Just sex? Are you serious? I don't believe you. How do I know there weren't others? I can't trust you. And yes, I want a divorce, and you'll pay for it," she retorted, her eyes blazing. "You do realize our state passed a new law benefiting the wronged party in cases of infidelity, right? I'll file for divorce under that law and take everything you have. I'll even take your business and make you work under me." I took a deep breath, surprised by the icy determination in her voice. "Wow, I didn't expect you to be so cold and ruthless. Like I said, it wasn't love, just sex. And only those 2 times. Is this really what you want? Are you sure there's no room for forgiveness? Maybe we could go to counseling," I said, making a last-ditch effort to salvage the marriage. "No, it's over. I'm not staying married to a cheater," she shot back. "Pack your clothes and go. Stay with Roger or find a hotel, but I don't want you here. You'll hear from my lawyer soon." A smirk tugged at my lips despite myself. She had no idea she was digging her own grave. Noticing my expression, she spat. "What's with the smirk?" "Well, sweetheart, you just made my decision much easier," I said, a hint of satisfaction in my tone. Her eyes narrowed suspiciously. "What do you mean? Let me show you something." "Get dressed and come with me," I replied, my voice steady and commanding. Still angry but confused, she followed me to the workshop. I positioned her at the window where I'd recorded everything. "Stay here and don't move until I'm back," I said. I stepped outside, connected my iPhone to the Bluetooth speakers, and returned to the workshop. She stood there, still fuming but now puzzled as I pressed play. As she listened, her confusion quickly turned to shock. The moment she recognized her own voice in the recording, she fell to her knees, tears streaming down her face as realization dawned. "Baby, I'm so sorry. How did you hear this?" she sobbed, her voice cracking with guilt. "I don't see why that matters," I said evenly. "I had to come back for something I'd forgotten. I didn't want to disturb your party, so I came in through the back. That's when I heard you talking about me. I recorded it to tease you later, but when I heard you mention Stan, I stayed and recorded the rest." "Darling, you heard me say it was just once and purely physical," she pleaded. "There's nothing between us. I'm so sorry. You weren't supposed to find out." Amid her tears, Laura's words were filled with regret. Her voice quivered with genuine remorse as she pleaded for forgiveness. The vulnerability in her voice showed how much she wished for understanding. But I stood unmoved by her tears. My voice was cold as I revealed the painful truth. The betrayal had rooted deep, and I couldn't shake the anger consuming me. "I heard everything, Laura. I said, devoid of emotion. But you left out how you admitted thinking of him when we're together. How am I supposed to just let that go? For the first time in our marriage, her tears didn't move me. The pain of knowing she fantasized about another man while I gave her my all was too much. I can't overlook this, I continued bitterly, and I can't forget that you never planned to tell me and kept me in the dark. You've broken something inside me, and I don't know if I can ever trust you again. How can I believe you love me if you think of someone else? Anger bubbled up, and I knew I deserved more than this. The thought of staying with someone who wasn't fully mine was the final straw. I can't pretend everything is fine, I said firmly. Thinking of another man while we're physically engaged is enough for me to walk away. I don't know how to love you knowing that in our most private moments, you're not truly with me. The pain in my heart was suffocating, and the idea of mending our relationship felt impossible. Forgiving her after such a profound betrayal seemed out of reach. The silence between us was thick as my words sank in. There was nothing left to say. The truth had been laid bare, and the wound was too deep to heal. The damage was irreparable, and forgiveness felt unimaginable. In that moment, I knew our love was gone. The future we'd envisioned was now just a distant memory. It was a painful realization, but one I had to accept if I ever wanted to heal and move forward, even if that meant doing so without her. No, that's not what I meant. You don't understand, Laura said, her voice desperate. I love you and don't want him. Bob, please give me a chance to explain everything. Don't lie to me, I shot back, my voice shaking. I heard everything on that recording. Just the thought of him in our bed is unbearable. I never thought you'd betray me like this. If I'm wrong, look me in the eyes and tell me it's not true. Tell me you weren't thinking of him when we were together. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. That's right, you can't even look at me, I said bitterly. Damn it, you've ruined everything. Bob, please, she pleaded, tears streaming down her face. I love you. I'm sorry. I didn't mean... Laura, after I divorce you, you can be with him, and then you won't have to dream about him anymore, I said coldly. Through her sobs, she whispered, You can't divorce me. I love you, please. Let me make this right. Is this funny to you now? I said, my tone laced with bitter disbelief. You want my forgiveness? Imagine how shocked I am. I'll fix this. I love you. I'm sorry. What makes you think I want to stay with you after what you did? Do I seem like someone who's going to accept being betrayed by his unfaithful wife? My voice wavered with a mix of pain and emotion as I confronted Laura. For 3 days I've been torn apart. Part of me wanted to forgive you and repair what we had. I thought I could get over a one-time mistake. But that all changed when I heard what you told your friends. The hurt was clear in my voice, and I couldn't mask it. The way she had shared romantic thoughts about our lovemaking shattered the last bit of trust I had. In all our years together, I had never openly cried. But now, I couldn't hold back my pain. I felt humiliated. Laura, I said, tears streaming and my voice breaking, your friends now see me as an ignorant husband. It's like I was living in a lie, blind to what was happening behind my back. Knowing that they were laughing at me, calling me ignorant, destroyed any self-respect I had left. This is not just about our marriage. You've ruined our friendships too. Seeing my tears, she was visibly shaken and realized the extent of the pain she had caused. I think deep down, she never meant to hurt me. But the sight of my tears brought the reality of her actions crashing down on her. Overwhelmed with regret and sadness, she cried and reached out to hug me. I pushed her away and took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. I know that before I might have been blind to certain things, but now everything is different. I can't ignore what I know. I won't let myself be treated this way ever again. My voice was laced with the pain of betrayal. I wanted to save our marriage, to find a way back to the love we once shared. But the reality of the situation grew clearer, and I couldn't see a path forward. When I was driving back from the fishing trip, I thought about how I might be able to save our marriage, I admitted, my voice cracking. But honestly, I couldn't see a way. So I decided to leave the choice up to you. I don't know if I can trust you again, and I don't want to live with constant doubt and pain. There was a long, heavy pause after I finished speaking. The future felt uncertain, but one thing was clear. I couldn't stay in a marriage poisoned by betrayal and mistrust. What do you mean you'll let me decide? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Well, I began, my tone steady. Since I couldn't decide what to do, I came up with a plan. I told you a story about an affair and watched how you'd react. The beauty of this plan was that our future was in your hands. In that story I told 20 minutes ago, I never actually said I was the one having an affair, only that there had been one. I used your own words about dreaming of him while we were together. You know, the way you think of him while I'm giving you everything I have. I said it was just a one-time thing, just sex, not love. I even suggested counseling, hoping we could work through it. Do you remember how you responded? She stood in silence, eyes locked on the floor, unable to meet my gaze. You told me to leave our house and threatened to ruin me in the divorce, I continued. You said you'd take my business and make me a pool cleaner. You were merciless. So now, expect the same from me. I won't throw you out like you did to me, but you will move to the guest room because I don't want you in my bed. I'm meeting with a lawyer and filing for infidelity. And I'm looking forward to using that new divorce law you mentioned so eagerly in your anger. Bob, I didn't mean any of that, she said, her voice cracking. You have to believe me. Please don't do this. What about our 20 years together and our children? Emotion filled my voice as I faced Laura, each word breaking my heart. The betrayal hurt too much, and I couldn't ignore how her actions affected our entire family. This is going to be hard, I said, my voice shaking with a mix of anger and sadness. But I can't overlook what you did, Laura. When you chose to betray me and our family, you didn't think about the kids or our years together. The sting of her actions cut deep, consuming me with pain. The trust that had once held us together was gone, and I didn't see a way to rebuild it. What you did is unforgivable, I continued firmly. You'll face the consequences, just as you were ready to make me suffer for my mistakes. Now pack your things and move out of my room. My voice was heavy with sorrow as I distanced her from the space we once shared. The room that had been a sanctuary of our love was now tainted by betrayal. That night, I couldn't sleep, mourning the end of my marriage. I had loved her with everything I had, but knowing that she thought of another man during our most affectionate moments weighed on me like a dark cloud. I know some men can forgive such betrayals, but I couldn't find that strength. The pain was overwhelming, and the broken trust felt impossible to repair. Despite my lingering love for her, I couldn't move past her words. The dream of our future was shattered, and the loss was immense. All I could do was respect my own emotions, even if it meant letting go of the woman I had once loved deeply. Before I walked out, I looked at the woman I had cherished for the past 2 decades and said, "You broke my heart. Today I lost someone who didn't care about me, but you lost someone who was willing to do anything for you." The sound of her pleas for forgiveness echoed in my mind as I left Laura for the last time. Making the difficult call to my children was heartbreaking. I dreaded telling them the awful news. My son Michael responded with understanding and unwavering support, a small comfort in the chaos. But Katie's anger cut deep as her bond with her mother clouded her judgment. Despite my efforts to understand, the rift between us seemed insurmountable. Laura, in a rare moment of strength, spoke to Katie, admitting her grave mistake and urging her not to blame me, who was innocent in this. The children's lives were forever altered, but I remained committed to their future, promising to fund their education and care for them. The confrontations between the husbands and their wives were filled with betrayal and heartbreak. Mary was devastated when she heard about Laura's divorce and felt their years of friendship shatter. Roger was furious, struggling to understand why his wife kept the affair a secret and even appeared to condone it. The recording was a crushing blow for him, making him question everything. The resentment ran too deep to ignore, and their bond seemed beyond repair. The days that followed were filled with heavy hearts and pain as the consequences of their actions played out. The once close group of friends faced the harsh reality of betrayal and broken trust. Mary, heartbroken over Laura's divorce, confronted Roger and learned of her part in keeping the secret. The weight of her choices hit her hard, and she was filled with guilt. Roger's anger demanded answers. Why she had protected Laura and betrayed their best friend. Mary was speechless and filled with regret. At Scott's house, a similar scene unfolded when Emily faced the hurtful words on the recording. The humiliation and shame overwhelmed Scott, and he made the difficult choice to leave, leaving Emily in tears and full of remorse. Meanwhile, tension filled Bob and Laura's home as he served her divorce papers. Laura pleaded for forgiveness, realizing the magnitude of her mistake and the pain she caused, but her pleas fell on deaf ears. Bob's heart was too broken to consider reconciliation. The betrayal was too deep, and he knew he could never trust her again. Our case went before Judge Montresor. and the divorce process was a difficult ordeal. Laura desperately tried to save the marriage. During the trial, Stan testified with clear regret for the damage he'd caused. Under the weight of guilt, his words were both an admission and a plea for forgiveness. The courtroom was thick with emotion as the recording played one final time. The judge's decision was swift. Bob was awarded a significant share of the assets, and spousal support was denied under the new state law. Laura painfully acknowledged that her actions had led to the collapse of her marriage. The excitement and passion she experienced with Stan now felt like a distant memory, buried under layers of regret and sorrow. The future she once envisioned was gone, leaving her with the consequences of her betrayal. She was forced to face the reality that she had lost not only her marriage, but also the stability and life she once cherished. The impact of their actions changed the lives of everyone involved, leaving behind heartache, regret, and shattered trust. The choices they made would shape their future as they grappled with the pain of past mistakes and searched for a way forward. Despite everything, Bob still cared for Laura and allowed her to stay in the guest room until she could find a place of her own and plan her next steps. The house was big enough for them to coexist with minimal contact, but the emotional tension was undeniable. Bob worked longer hours, coming home late to avoid seeing her. Laura, to her credit, made efforts to win Bob back, but he had no desire to reconcile. Bob started dating Becky, his secretary, who was eager to make him happy. She recognized that Bob was a great match, and despite being 10 years younger, she was content with him. Becky thought to herself, "I can't believe Laura let him go. I would never make that mistake. I'll be everything he needs and more." Bob, still haunted by the memories of his failed marriage, found comfort in Becky's youthful energy and devotion. Laura was painfully aware of Bob's shifting focus. The emotional weight of the past 2 months pressed heavily on her. Watching Becky move into the space that was once hers served as a constant reminder of what she had lost. It broke her heart to witness the joy and affection Bob now shared with another woman. Every glance, touch, and moment between Bob and Becky felt like a knife to her heart. Jealousy consumed her, and she was overwhelmed with regret for the choices that had led her to this point. What was once a home filled with love had become a source of pain and sorrow. The bed where she and Bob had once shared tender moments now belonged to Bob and Becky. The thought of them being together in that room tormented Laura deeply. It was a stark reminder of the selfish decisions that had led her to lose everything she valued. Alone and frightened, Laura struggled to find a way out of her emotional turmoil. The future seemed daunting and uncertain. With no job and no prospects, the fear of facing life without the man she once adored haunted her. The uncertainty of what lay ahead only worsened her suffering. Left with no other choice, Laura began to accept her new reality. She had lost the man she once held most dear, and there was no going back. Coming to terms with her mistakes, Laura knew she had to face her past and begin rebuilding her life. It would be a difficult journey, but she realized that she needed to find the inner strength to move forward despite the challenges ahead. She hoped that, one day, she could find peace and happiness again, even if it meant letting go of the man she once believed she would be with forever. At Bob's office, tension filled the air when word spread that Stan was the reason behind Bob's divorce. Stan became a pariah. Conversations stopped when he walked by, and nobody included him in discussions. He was treated like the outcast he had become. Stan quickly realized that his work environment had become unbearable, with the negative atmosphere affecting his productivity and leading to complaints that hurt the company. Unable to endure the pressure, Stan decided to start his own business, taking several clients with him. He saw it as a chance to make a fresh start and build his success. But Bob's lawyer soon informed him that he was violating a non-compete agreement. Stan, who lacked formal education and a clear understanding of legal matters, continued growing his business, oblivious to the legal repercussions. Within 10 months, Stan's business had grown to over 100 clients, and he felt triumphant, as if he had finally outdone Bob. But his victory was short-lived. One day, he was served with a lawsuit seeking $1 million in damages for breaching the non-compete clause and causing significant financial damage to Bob's company. As the legal battle unfolded, Bob watched from the sidelines, still nursing the pain of Stan's betrayal. Money wasn't what Bob cared about most. It was revenge. He wanted Stan to pay for taking his wife, breaking his marriage, and stealing his clients. The lawsuit dragged on for months, adding stress to Stan's life. When the dust settled, the outcome was devastating for Stan. Bob won the lawsuit, reclaiming Stan's once successful business and leaving Stan with no option but to declare personal bankruptcy. The career Stan had built, first under Bob's company and then on his own, crumbled before his eyes. With no formal education and a tarnished reputation, Stan had to take on exhausting day jobs just to survive. The consequences of his actions haunted him, serving as a stark reminder to never interfere in another man's marriage or betray trust so recklessly. Scott and Roger's wives, who witnessed the drama unfold, realized how close they had come to risking their own marriages. Watching Laura's downfall was a wake-up call for them. They came to appreciate the value of forgiveness, respect, and nurturing their relationships. Determined to avoid the same fate, they worked on rebuilding trust and communication with their husbands. Over time, they managed to strengthen their marriages and rediscover the love they once shared. However, their friendships with Laura and Bob were casualties of the past, and the fond memories of their time together were overshadowed by the pain that followed. Laura's life took a bleak turn as she tried to cope with the aftermath of her failed marriage. Working as a receptionist at a dental office gave her some financial stability, but did little to fill the emptiness inside. Living in a small, dimly lit apartment, she felt the weight of loneliness and regret every day. In an effort to move on, she began dating an older man she met at work. He was kind, attentive, and steady, but the relationship felt shallow compared to what she once shared with Bob. The joy she once knew was now just a distant memory, and she couldn't escape the haunting pain of her past mistakes. In her quietest moments, Laura reflected on what might have been. She wished she had made different choices and preserved the life she had with Bob. But she had to face reality. She had thrown away something precious and irreplaceable. The future that once seemed bright now felt like a shadow, leaving her with a deep sense of sadness and longing. Bob, meanwhile, sometimes missed Laura, but Becky quickly filled that void. Becky, determined to be the ideal partner, brought energy, laughter, and warmth back into his life. Bob loved her enthusiasm and the way she made him feel young again. A year after they started dating, they married in a small, intimate ceremony. Another year later, Michael and Katie welcomed a new half-brother into the family. Life continued, with new beginnings and old memories echoing in the background. A year has passed since the upheaval that shattered my world. The quiet moments are the hardest, those rare times when the silence amplifies memories. I often find myself at the edge of that same lake, staring into its reflective surface, contemplating how one seemingly ordinary day could change everything. Life, however, has a peculiar way of mending the broken pieces, even if the original shape is never fully restored. Becky has been a balm to my wounds, a reminder that love can return in different forms. Her laughter, so bright and genuine, filled spaces in my heart that I thought would remain hollow forever. Michael and Katie adjusted in their own ways. Michael, supportive and understanding, became a silent guardian of my well-being, while Katie's anger softened over time. Laura's heartfelt admissions to her and the visible regret she carried seemed to mend some of those family rifts. Laura, now a distant part of my life, lives in a shadow of what once was. The small apartment and the quiet, simpler existence she chose are a stark contrast to the vibrant life we once shared. Occasionally, word of her reaches me through old friends or by chance in the echoes of past social circles. It stings sometimes to think of her regret, but it doesn't stir anger like it used to. It only serves as a somber reminder of what trust, once shattered, leaves behind. Stan disappeared from my thoughts and from the community's whispers. I sometimes wonder if he found a semblance of peace, or if regret gnawed at him as it did for Laura. The lawsuit that had consumed our days was both a punishment and a release. The end of it allowed me to start reclaiming parts of myself that betrayal had taken. New life has also brought new hope. The birth of my youngest son signified more than just a continuation of my family. It marked a new chapter, one not weighed down by the mistakes of the past, but illuminated by the promise of unconditional love and second chances. Becky, with her relentless optimism and fierce loyalty, reminded me that happiness was still possible. Our home, once the site of silent suffering, is now filled with laughter and the patter of little feet. Despite everything, there is a sliver of forgiveness buried deep within me. It's not for Laura or Stan or even myself. It's for the path life took with its merciless lessons. I learned to respect the fragility of relationships and the strength needed to rebuild. Not necessarily what was lost, but something new and equally valuable. Standing at the water's edge, I breathe in the crisp air, close my eyes, and feel a weight lifting bit by bit. The horizon stretches endlessly before me, a symbol of everything yet to come.